I didn't even get to finish my toast. 1 minute I was raising my glass, smiling through tears, celebrating our 20th anniversary in front of a room full of friends, family, business partners, people who'd watched us build everything from scratch. And then, he stood up. Not to join me, not to hold my hand or thank me or say something sweet like he used to, but to clear his throat and introduce her. "She's not just my partner now," he said. Voice calm like this wasn't the earthquake it was. "She's my future. And I think it's time everyone knows." And just like that, he gestured toward the back of the ballroom. All heads turned. I turned. And there she was. Barely out of college, in a tight red dress and heels that screamed, "Watch me win." Her lipstick matched the wine I nearly choked on, and her hand was already resting on his arm like she'd always belonged there. My jaw didn't drop. My fingers just tightened around the stem of my champagne glass like it was the only thing keeping me from disappearing. Gasps. Whispers. One woman dropped her fork. Another pulled out her phone. And me? I just stood there, frozen, in the silver dress he'd picked out for me, the one he said made me look like the love of his life, a lie that still glittered under the lights. I couldn't even move. It was like my body refused to react before my heart caught up. And when it did, all it did was ache, not in some dramatic movie-style way. It was quieter than that. Like something curling in on itself, collapsing without sound. Someone at the next table let out a laugh, nervous, awkward. I recognized her. She was one of our investors' wives. She quickly covered her mouth, but the damage was done. More chuckles followed. Like this was some twisted performance. Like I was the fool who missed her cue. He didn't even look at me. Not once. He just kept talking. About fresh starts, unavoidable truths, and how we can all grow through love if we let go of the past. The past. That's what he called our 20 years. The house we built from the ground up. The business we launched from our garage. The dog we rescued together after that miscarriage. The one that almost broke me. All of it. The past. His new muse smiled politely, like she knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Everything in that moment told me who mattered now. And it wasn't me. I watched as he clinked glasses with her. With her. While our wedding photos still flickered on the slideshow screen behind them. It was like the universe was mocking me frame by frame. No one stopped him. No one stepped in. Not even his sister, my best friend, who sat there chewing her salad like this was just another Tuesday. And I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the glass, flip the table, and burn that damn slideshow to the ground. But I didn't. I simply sat down, straightened my dress, and sipped my drink. Because sometimes the only way to survive the worst night of your life is to pretend it isn't happening. But inside, something shifted, broke, and then hardened. I remember staring at the exit sign glowing across the ballroom and wondering, how do you rebuild your life while everyone is still clapping for the one who destroyed it? People think betrayal begins with a kiss. But no, mine started with silence. The kind that crept in slowly, between bedtime kisses that stopped landing, dinners eaten in front of separate screens, and text messages that used to end with hearts, then just stopped altogether. But if I'm being honest, I didn't notice it right away. Or maybe I just didn't want to. I was too busy keeping everything else from falling apart. Back then, we were still in the middle of building our business. A boutique interior design firm. My dream. Funded by his connections, yes, but fueled by my late nights, my sketchbooks, my charm with clients. I handled the vision, the numbers, the chaos. He handled the charm, the cocktails, the conversations at networking events I was always too tired to attend. We used to be a team. At least, that's what I told myself. I remember the first time I skipped a college reunion because of a client meeting. He promised he'd make it up to me with a weekend getaway. I never took that trip. I remember canceling doctor's appointments, missing birthdays. Mine, not his, just to make sure the project launch didn't collapse. And still, I smiled. I smiled when he brought flowers on a Tuesday, not knowing they came with guilt. I thought that was just love in its grown-up form. Less passion, more partnership. But there were signs, of course, like how he stopped asking me to join him at events, how he said I didn't need to go because I looked so tired lately, or how he started buying clothes I didn't recognize, edgier, tighter, clearly not his taste. I thought maybe he was going through something, a midlife itch, a moment, and I wanted to give him space. That was my mistake. I kept giving and giving. And he just kept taking. I gave up weekends, sleep, friendships. I even gave up on trying for another baby after the second miscarriage because he said, maybe it's not meant to be. And I didn't have the strength to argue with fate and my husband in the same breath. I held it all together like a woman raised to think endurance was the same thing as love. And then, little things began to crack. He started using the guest bathroom more, kept his phone face down, took longer showers. Once, I caught him humming in the kitchen an upbeat pop song way too new for him. And when I teased him, he got defensive, almost angry, like I'd interrupted some private joke I wasn't invited to. Still, I brushed it off, because that's what you do when you're the one holding the weight of the life you both built. I remember one night, I'd made this risotto he used to beg me for back when we couldn't even afford arborio rice. I set the table, lit candles, even wore lipstick, though my lips were chapped from forgetting to hydrate. He walked in, took one look and said, "Oh, you didn't have to do all this. I already ate." Just like that. I laughed it off, pretended it didn't sting, pretended my fingers weren't trembling as I scraped the untouched risotto into the trash. But something changed in me that night. Not a full realization, just a flicker of something, off, like the scent of smoke before you realize your kitchen's on fire. Then came the compliments, but not to me. He started talking about this new intern, always by the book, always so organized. He'd slip her name into stories, casually, too casually. Sophia had this great idea for the client deck. Sophia stayed late again, she's so committed. Sophia thinks we should switch to a younger demographic. I nodded, smiled, played the good wife. But inside I began keeping count. And one night, as he climbed into bed late, again, I asked, "Do you think we're still us?" He paused, just long enough for me to feel the answer before he gave it. "I think we've grown in different directions." He said it gently, like a man letting go of a balloon he didn't want to admit he'd already popped. And I just lay there, still, swallowing the lump in my throat, trying not to cry over a sentence that didn't even sound like heartbreak, just resignation. But something inside me whispered, "He's already gone." And that was before I knew how far he'd really gone. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing special about it. Just another weekday between errands and invoices. I had gone to grab my laptop charger from his home office, a room I rarely stepped into anymore because, well, it stopped feeling like ours a long time ago. But his laptop was open. He never left it open. And there it was. An email thread. The subject line, "Weekend away, can't wait to see you again." I didn't even have to click. The preview pane told me everything. Her name was there. Sophia. The intern. The same girl I'd defended when staff whispered that she was too flirty or trying too hard. I used to tell them she was ambitious, eager. The kind of intern I wished I'd had when I was starting out. I scrolled. Not even fast, just one email at a time. Messages going back months, photos, inside jokes, receipts from dinners he claimed were late-night meetings, a spa booking for 2 on our anniversary weekend. I didn't scream. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I just sat down in his chair. The one that still had my initials embroidered into the leather, back when he gifted it to me as co-founder, co-queen. And I read every single word. There was one message I kept coming back to. One he wrote just 3 weeks earlier. "You're the light I didn't know I needed. She doesn't challenge me anymore. She just expects too much." I blinked. Expect too much? Was that what he thought asking for respect was? I closed the laptop, walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water and watched my hands shake so badly I nearly dropped the glass. But I didn't cry. Not then. I took out my phone, opened notes, and started typing. Not a letter, not a goodbye, just names, dates, accounts, every email I could remember, every lie I'd overlooked, every time I'd said it's probably nothing. It wasn't nothing. That night, I made dinner like usual. Lamb chops, roasted carrots. A bottle of red he once picked on our trip to Napa, back when we still held hands without thinking. He walked in late, again. Tie loosened, smile too easy. Said something like, "Smells amazing, babe," as if the truth hadn't already bled into the air between us. I smiled back, sat across from him, watched him eat, chewed like a man with no conscience. Told me a story about a client I knew wasn't real. Mentioned Sophia once, just once, but caught himself and pivoted fast. too fast. He didn't notice the way I kept my phone near my lap. Didn't notice how I gently asked questions I already knew the answers to. Where he was last Thursday, who he met in Chicago, whether he still believed in second chances. He said, of course, people make mistakes, but love's about seeing the best in each other. And I wanted to laugh, right there. But I didn't, because I wasn't ready to burn it all yet. The next morning I called in sick to work, first time in years. Said I had a migraine, said I needed a rest. What I really needed was time. I called a friend, Amanda, an old college roommate turned divorce attorney. She always said, call me if he ever turns stupid. Turns out, he did. I didn't tell her everything, not yet. Just enough for her to say, you need to start documenting. Financials, assets, emails, timestamps. Don't let him know you're on to him, not until you're ready. And I wasn't, not yet. I still had keys to the office, access to the payroll. The company we'd built together was legally under both our names, but guess who handled the back end? Me. For weeks after, I played the part. The loving wife, the smiling partner, the fool he thought he'd tamed. But behind the scenes, I was building something. Not revenge, not yet. Just a quiet kind of power. The kind you hold in your hands and don't squeeze until it's time. And every time he kissed me on the cheek like routine, every time he left the room to take a call, every time he slipped out of bed thinking I was asleep, I whispered to myself, you'll regret this. He just didn't know it yet. It wasn't the first time he stood up in a crowded room and humiliated me. But this time, I was ready. Months had passed since our anniversary night, the one where he replaced 20 years of marriage with a smirk and a woman young enough to call me ma'am. I'd spent those months in silence, not because I was weak, but because I was preparing. That night broke something in me. But it also cleared something. It showed me exactly who he was, and more importantly, who I no longer needed to be. So I waited. I let him move into the guest house. Let him parade Sophia around like she was the second coming of success. Let him think I was still clinging to the edges of a marriage already on fire. He didn't know that while he was celebrating his newfound freedom, I was at the courthouse, at the bank, at the Secretary of State's office. I was moving names, shifting documents, unraveling everything we built and rebuilding it under mine. Which is why, when the Regional Builders Gala rolled around, an event we'd always attended together, I told him, no, you should go, take her. He didn't even hesitate, just kissed the top of my head like I was his sister and said, you sure? I smiled. Positive. And I meant it. Because that night, I walked in 10 minutes after them, in a black dress, no ring, hair down, and not a single piece of jewelry he ever gave me. I didn't need reminders of things already buried. I stayed in the back of the ballroom while they schmoozed under chandeliers, clinking glasses with our clients, investors, friends who didn't know better or didn't care enough to choose a side. And then the host stepped up to the podium. Tonight, he began, we honor a firm that's redefined boutique real estate in this region. From its humble beginnings in a garage to this year's $18 million revenue milestone. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our true architect, Mrs. Delaney Hart. Heads turned, including his. I walked slowly, calm, certain. And as I passed their table, I saw Sophia's smile flicker, like she could feel the temperature change. I stepped onto the stage, took the mic and said, thank you. For years I've stood behind the success of this firm. I've written the business plans, managed the risk, took the losses privately and let the wins be shared. I let the silence hang. And now, I'm standing in front because some things deserve to be seen. I turned toward him. You once told me I was just the support, the one who kept the lights on while you shined. A pause, just long enough to let him remember. Well, I rewired the lights. The room had gone quiet, the kind of quiet that swells before impact, before someone realizes they're standing on a trapdoor and the floor is no longer theirs. I took a small breath and continued. Last quarter, our firm quietly underwent restructuring. I say our with generosity. Because as of this month, I am the sole registered owner of Delaney Hart Interiors. He stood up. From across the room, I saw him push his chair back so fast it nearly toppled. He looked stunned, like a man realizing too late he never had a backup plan. What the hell are you talking about? He snapped, loud enough that even the bartenders froze. I kept my tone even. I'm talking about the paperwork you never read. The partnership agreements you never bothered to renew, the silent investor clause you dismissed as just formality. You signed away your power, Marcus, one lazy signature at a time. Someone laughed, soft, sharp. He pointed a trembling finger. You forged. No, I said calmly but loud enough to stop the air from moving. I documented. I retained counsel. I followed every procedure. And I notified you. You just didn't read the emails, Baf gasps. Sophia tried to shrink into her seat, suddenly very aware that the cameras were rolling, that this wasn't going to be the romantic business empire she thought she was marrying into. I glanced at her. Oh, and Sophia, I added lightly, you should know your corporate credit card has been deactivated. I suggest checking your hotel status tonight. A wave of murmurs rose again. He started to move toward the stage. You don't have the right. I turned to the event host. Do I have another minute? He nodded, stunned. I faced the crowd. I also want to take this moment to clarify a personal update. Marcus and I are finalizing our divorce. As per our prenuptial agreement, which includes a fidelity clause, his extramarital relationship nullifies his claim to any shared property, including the house, assets, and any future revenue generated from this company. I let that settle like slow thunder. And since I filed for divorce before tonight, with time-stamped evidence and legal verification, I added, eyes locked on him, he is now officially my ex-husband. He just stood there, mouth slightly open, hands balled into fists. The man who once stood tall in that same kind of room, announcing his future in front of a crowd that had clapped for him, now couldn't find the words to stand behind himself. I looked at the audience one last time. I used to think the worst thing a man could do was leave. But I was wrong. The worst thing is to stay just long enough to make you doubt yourself. And then, with my voice barely above a whisper, I finished, but I don't doubt myself anymore. I stepped off the stage to a silence that said more than applause ever could. I didn't look back, because I had no reason to. They say karma takes time. Mine arrived in a suit and tie with a clipboard and eviction papers. 2 days after the gala, Marcus was served, not by me, by a court officer. The guest house he'd been sleeping in, legally attached to the main property. And the property, now solely under my name. He called. Of course he did. 5 times. I let it ring. When he finally texted, it just said, "You're really doing this?" I stared at the screen, then typed, "You already did." That was the last message I sent him. I heard from mutual friends that Sophia lasted exactly 1 week after the fallout. Turns out, she wasn't interested in a man who didn't own the firm, the house, or even his own email domain anymore. She moved out quietly. He tried to follow her. But her new apartment had a doorman. Then came the headlines, small blogs at first, then trade publications. Executive removed from partnership over ethics breach. Fidelity clause invoked in surprise divorce filing. Nothing scandalous, just facts. Cold, legal, public. Clients pulled out, vendors hesitated. People he once charmed now watched him like he had something contagious. I didn't leak anything. I didn't need to. The truth has its own weight when dropped in the right place. One afternoon I passed by our old office, well, my office now, and saw him standing across the street. Just standing. In a wrinkled jacket, staring up at the window like he didn't recognize the building anymore. He didn't come inside. And I didn't wave. Because some goodbyes don't need closure. Just distance. I heard he started consulting, freelance work, hourly contracts, nothing stable, nothing permanent. He tried to use our old firm's name in a pitch once, and got a cease and desist letter within 48 hours. That came from my new legal team. He sent one final email after that. "We could have handled this differently. You didn't have to go nuclear." I didn't respond. I just read it once and let it sit there, like a ghost. Because what he called nuclear was simply consequence. No revenge, no dramatics, just cause and effect. The people who once toasted him at business dinners, they stopped inviting him. He went quiet on social media, deleted his LinkedIn, took down the photos of Sophia and the gala. Even his own sister, who once told me to be more understanding, called me, voice low, and said, "I didn't know it was that bad. I'm sorry." I didn't need her apology. But I let her say it anyway. And the dog? She never once sniffed at the door after he left. It was like she knew. Like she'd made her choice the moment he packed his things in silence and walked out. I didn't tell anyone what to think of him. Didn't poison the well. I just told the truth when asked. And truth, I've found, has a habit of doing all the heavy lifting. So no, I didn't ruin his life. He just didn't think I'd protect mine. And when the reckoning came, it wasn't loud. It was paperwork, process servers, password resets, locks changed, names updated. It was silence, the kind that comes after the storm, when everything broken has been cleared away and only the solid things remain. Some mornings are quieter than others, not lonely, just still. The kind of stillness that settles into your bones, not because nothing is happening, but because nothing has to happen anymore. I wake up when the sunlight hits the windows. No alarms, no second pair of shoes by the door. Just mine and hers. I never changed the locks on her. She still curls up on the end of the bed like nothing ever shifted. Like loyalty doesn't need explanation or apology. And maybe that's what I learned through all of this. That some love stays. Not because it's dramatic, not because it announces itself with flowers or grand gestures, but because it shows up every single day. Quietly, reliably, without conditions. The house feels different now. Same walls, same kitchen cabinets I once painted blue in a burst of weekend spontaneity. But now the silence inside them doesn't echo. It holds, it wraps, and I don't fill it with noise anymore. I let myself take time to water plants, to open old cookbooks, to actually sit down with a mug of tea and finish it while it's still hot. I stopped flinching when the doorbell rings, stopped bracing for disappointment, stopped wondering if I was ever too much or not enough. Because somewhere between the signatures and the silence, I found something steadier than forgiveness or revenge. I found peace. Last week, I took the dog for a walk through our old neighborhood. The same sidewalks we used to jog on. The same bakery we used to fight over croissants from. The same front gate he used to pull into like it was his by birthright. But this time I walked slower. Not to linger, just to notice. A little boy waved at the dog. A woman complimented my coat. No one looked at me like I was someone's wife or someone's ex. I was just me. And that felt bigger than any revenge could ever reach. Because healing doesn't come all at once. It's not a loud victory. It's the quiet realization that you can choose your own story, even if someone tried to write you out of it. It's choosing to rebuild, not in spite of the wreckage, but because of it. It's knowing you're allowed to leave the door open again, not for someone else, but for the version of yourself that's been waiting on the front porch this whole time. If you're listening to this, and you've ever felt erased, silenced, or made to feel small, I want you to know, you're not broken. You're not behind. You are allowed to reclaim what's yours, even if the only thing left is your name. That's more than enough to begin again. So take it. And when you do, don't whisper it, say it like you mean it. Have you ever gone through something like this? I'd love to hear your story below, truly. Sometimes, just knowing you're not the only one makes all the difference. And if you know someone who's still waiting to remember their worth, send this to them. Let it be the reminder they didn't know they needed today. And if you want to hear more stories that remind you healing is possible, feel free to subscribe. No pressure, just a quiet corner for voices like yours and stories like ours.